The APEC Summit has had a good number of panel discussions and meetings, including some focused on artificial intelligence. KTVU's Brooks Torellos has a look at the important conversations about technology that are happening at this week's conference.
Motorcades, crowds, and enthusiasm filled the streets of San Francisco. While the spotlight may be on key leaders rolling into town, there's also a focus on other key players shaping the future.
We wanted to highlight and showcase the innovative spirit as well as the entrepreneurial spirit that is the DNA of the state of California.
And the perception of San Francisco as ground zero for emerging technology.
I think we're leading in many ways in terms of innovation, in terms of regulation and security for data, for information, but also we're taking the risks by investing so much.
AI leaders encouraging the 20 other countries represented here to invest, inspire, and work together.
Okay, so my name is Helen Thomas. I'm here as a moderator for the AI panel. And when Darlene and I look at the program, I said, why do you put AI at the end of this event? And now I realized everybody before the panel actually talked about AI, so obviously the AI panel has to be at the end. It is true. You know, when we're sitting in the audience, everybody brought up AI, generative AI, data, automation, robotics, lots of things. So my personal journey with AI actually started 5 years ago, 2018, just around this time, November, when a recruiter called me and talked to me about DMAI, dark matter artificial intelligence, and that's when I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Mark Nisberg. Mark got his PhD from Harvard. He studied AI while many people don't even think about AI with David Mumford, one of the legends in the field. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mark Nisberg, who is the executive director of Human Compatible AI Center at UC Berkeley. So go Bears.
Thank you, Helen. And thank you to the studio audience that I will now not be looking at. So, it's an honor to be here. I am going to give you a view from the lab, from my vantage point at a public university next door to Silicon Valley. Across the bay is Berkeley AI Research, one of Earth's great public AI labs. We have 60 professors in computer science and robotics and machine learning, computer vision, psychology, economics, and the list goes on. We have 250 PhD students and thousands of undergraduates, and they're all working on the next breakthroughs in AI and are generally drawn to do social good. UC has 10 campuses and about 250,000 students on a $47 billion annual budget, of which $3 billion is for Berkeley. It's famous for progressive politics, and it's ranked top in computer science globally and has been for many years. So now that you know where I'm from, I'm going to share my views on what's real and what's next. And some of these views are not really in the mainstream. We've all been listening pretty much all day and for the past year that generative AI could transform most functional areas in pretty much every sector. The thing is that it's built on top of 25 years. We're 25 years into the era of globally adopted internet and always on internet, about 15 years, 10 years since the internet in your pocket was broadly adopted, and the Internet of Things reached your doorbell, and the rise of the platform economy. But we're only 1 year into this era of generative AI. And so generative AI is just getting started. The AI phenomenon is built on our vast highly connected computing infrastructure that, in the developed world, is interposed into nearly every human activity. The devices in our pockets have sensors, cameras, motion, location, beamforming microphone arrays, and we click and hover and watch and listen and record videos, and all that activity creates digital data to the tune over 120 zettabytes per year and climbing exponentially. That's 120 billion terabytes. If you're lucky, your device has maybe 1 terabyte on it. And the firms offering the connected services are among the largest commercial enterprises ever created. So the data and the processing power to train these systems arose from this vast infrastructure. And when embeddings and transformer architectures emerged around 2017, big tech had already built the cloud computing resources that underpin this. So AI owes the current spotlight to the fact that we're living in a world of always-on, powerful, sensor-rich, ubiquitous, connected devices with highly centralized digital services of staggering processing power, and AI is just the cherry on top. That's my view. So let's talk about what's real. Generative AI could transform every sector, and it's a thrilling prospect, but from my perspective, it's still just a prospect right now. You know, we're 1 year into the experiment of generative AI. At the University of California's 10 campuses, where we teach 250,000 students, we are embracing promiscuous, deliberate, methodical experimentation, encouraging proper experimental methods and broad sharing of the outcomes. This same thing is happening at companies in every sector of the economy that I've spoken with, and some of them are even sharing outcomes. The early outcomes you may have read about are encouraging. Many tasks yield faster and higher quality results, 15% to 50% depending on the experience level of the user and the task for those who are using generative AI. A typical example is Copilot for coders, which for mid-level computer programs can double their efficiency. What's also real is that a few tasks see a huge leap, 10 or 100 times, sometimes 1,000 times, from judicious application of generative AI. For example, asset managers can use it to generate themed portfolios, and consulting companies can use it to test innovative product hypotheses, and you've heard other examples of things that might take a year, and they'll be done in one afternoon or a couple of weeks. It also seems that in many settings, the best results come from generative AI working side by side with subject matter experts at each step. And that's a model that I really believe in. Predictions about wiping out jobs through automation are not yet real. There are well-known limitations of generative AI systems, hallucination, the difficulty in applying common logical reasoning. And so this means that even on carefully curated corpora of writing and illustrations from the best verifiable sources used for training, there is no guarantee of reliable or sensible outputs. There's promise, but the jury is still out. In the lab, we're only beginning to find ways to understand the principles by which these powerful systems operate. So for now, this is a period of experimentation. So what's next? We need all kinds of regulation for these AI systems. Like deep learning systems that brought AI back into the spotlight 10 years ago, generative AI systems can fail and cause harm. If you ask them again, you'll get a different answer, right? And they're very hard to backtrace and to correct to avoid future harm, something we expect in engineered systems like aircraft. And right now, although generative AI can be used to maintain something like a hydroelectric dam, there are really only just now beginning to be regulatory regimes covering their use. In China, as in California and now Washington, there are safety-oriented regulations for these large language models, or like ChatGPT. But it's still the case that in the United States, we have a stronger regulatory regime in place for windshield wipers than we do for AI. This is my internal image of what a transformer looks like. There are, in this case, something like 350 billion of these knobs, and this thing is trained, and you adjust the knobs on training data of something like 1 trillion words scraped from the internet. So the IP legend, Larry Lessig, said that code is the law. But that no longer applies to these systems because code is only a tiny part of a system like ChatGPT, right? It's tiny compared to the code for something like Microsoft Word. It's the vast corpora of training data and the layers of training and all of these parameters, right? The trillion parameters, right, that are really defining something like GPT-4. So working with a system like this is really like working with a natural phenomenon, and assurances are only good in cases that have been tested, and even then it's hard to give guarantees. There's also a new exciting set of vistas in liability, whose fault is the misbehavior of a language model, and intellectual property, should we pay royalties to writers and artists whose works are used for training, and how, and who owns the title to works created with a generative AI system. And you heard about these today. And I think we really need to consider, many things in ways that we hadn't before. The other thing that's real is that the power of generative AI has barely been tapped. As you may have heard, the big closed model generative AI companies, there's one called OpenAI, are leapfrogging new, more featureful and powerful versions. Last week, GPT-4 Turbo and Twitter X Grok were released, increasing capabilities, decreasing prices, and adding, in the case of OpenAI, a copyright shield promising to pay legal damages in case your GPT-4-based service is sued for copyright infringement. And there are open source language models like Llama from Meta and Hugging Face coming in from France, enabling a new class of smaller, hopefully more efficient, purpose-built alternatives to the resource-intensive GPT-4 and Claude and BART and Grok. And the frenzy is real. More than 65% of Y Combinator's summer cohort are building tools around generative AI across engineering, finance, health, sales, legal, biotech, you name it. So generative AI is linked to crazy economic promise. Here's McKinsey's projection from 63 use cases across business. And this is being borne out in the startups. The early response to the rise of generative AI as a general purpose technology is to automate or turbocharge existing steps in many business processes. And as we innovate using AI's possibilities, there are some that are reimagining entire processes and value chains. As you know, many businesses in California are part of this great AI experiment, not just the cherry on top, but the huge sundae underneath. It's part of the California DNA, the venture ecosystem, strong ties between great universities and labs, and all kinds of frontier research all the way to the startups. And that group of platform companies that have the precarious distinction of being the largest animals ever to roam the private sector planet, every one of them has a huge footprint in California. So AI has a place in the future of business in California. And the question is, who's going to find the 100x applications, not just applying AI for an incremental boost, which is like building a mechanical horse, but the winners who will intentionally or accidentally discover what AI unlocks and invent a car instead of a mechanical horse. Thank you.
We need more microphone. Thank you, Mark. Please take a seat in the middle. Yeah, wherever. So thank you for the tech stack, the lay of the land, I'd say. And I'm very excited to introduce all the other very, very special panelists. I met Jay 15 years ago. Jay Yoon, please join us. Okay, we're good. Okay, so Jay will have a chance to tell us about his new venture called GFT Ventures. And from my vantage point, Jay is one of the most candid, global, connected venture capitalists. As I said, I met Jay 15 years ago when I was at LiveScribe. And he connected Silicon Valley startups with global corporations across the Asia Pacific. And his current fund is also connected to Singapore, Indonesia, Asia Pacific. So he will have a chance to share his view on AI and his new venture. As you know, the world is small in Silicon Valley. A few weeks ago, when Jay and I were at another AI summit called the Securing AI Summit, we met Haoyi Xu. Please join us. So Haoyi had his degree from Stanford, and he's a guest lecturer at Stanford. And he's currently the Senior Vice President of AI and Machine Learning at the Palo Alto Networks. And he's been a serial entrepreneur. He started and launched many startups, and he will have a chance to share his journey with us. If you take a seat and just maybe sit here, right? Okay. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome the CEO and the president of Ripcord, Sam Fahmy. And Sam has been chief executives of multiple companies, and he actually built Cvent, the app we're using right now for this event. But his company actually sponsored our event today. So thank you, Sam, for being here and sponsoring us. And I'd like him to share a little bit about his company.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you, Helen, and nice to meet you all. At Ripcord, what we do, I think earlier, Mark spoke about how much data is being generated every day. That said, the quality of data is super important. So if you think of the historic data that is trapped in tens of millions of bank documents or tax forms or insurance policies or intellectual research and so on, there's so much data that's trapped in these documents, and data is also coming in every day. We file claims, we apply for passports, we file our tax returns, et cetera, et cetera. So what Ripcord does is we help companies, we use AI. Today you have about 1 billion people around the world. And their job, you have 1 billion people, their job is literally to look at documents all the time and understand what's in the document. It's something that was called data entry another time. It's, it was a great job, and for many people it still is. But guess what? Today with technologies like robotics and AI, you can automate much of that work. And that's really what we do, is we automate the process of extracting and understanding the context of data in documents. And if I can figure out if we can automate this. And the way we do that at Tripcord is we actually handle both paper documents, and believe it or not, right? We like to believe that we live in a digital society, and we all have mobile phones and mobile apps, etc. But even in the largest US banks, the largest insurance companies, government agencies, about 30% of documents that are coming in every day are still paper documents. So for paper documents, we have actually robots that remove the staples from paper documents, that remove papers from envelopes, etc., for the purpose of digitizing those documents. Because the first thing you have to do if you have paper documents is you have to create a digital copy. Today, most of that work is manual work. You have people that are removing staples by hand, etc. We automate that at Ripcord. Once a paper is digitized, it goes to our cloud, or if a document is native digital, it goes directly to our cloud. And instead of having a person looking at the piece of paper and understanding what's in that piece of paper, whether it's a tax form, IRS is our largest customer in the US, or an insurance claim, or whatever it may be, you have the AI actually in a very positive way understand the context of what's in the document. And for example, let's say you have a document. Let's say you have an insurance document, and that document has 4 different dates, right? You have 4 different dates in a document. Well, you have technology. Even technology on your phone today can extract the dates from that document. It's very simple. It is very commoditized. But what it cannot do, it cannot tell you which date is which, right? That uses a human being. A human being has to look at the document and say, okay, that looked like someone's birth date because it's maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. That date is in the future. It must be the expiration date of a credit card. That date is recent, so it must be the date of the claim. That date is 2 years in the future. It must be the date of the policy. So it requires someone to understand the context. And until today, you could not build technology to do that, to understand. Code cannot understand. Code can process. Regular software code. AI, you can train AI to understand. And that's what we're doing. We're using AI in a very positive way to understand and verify the information in documents. And guess what? We live in a world of our documents are all around us. Just think of your last 24 hours. I bet each one of us has dealt with some document that has gone somewhere. You have applied to something, you have responded to some request, etc. So we deal with documents every day. And that's really what we do, and we pass on the data that we extract from these documents to companies. It could be a government agency, whether in the US, in Japan, we have about half our business in Japan. It could be a bank, it could be an insurance company, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we do. And in doing that, what's the value? Is we free up thousands and thousands of hours of mundane work. Like, who grows up thinking, I really want, when I grow up, I want to be doing data entry. No one really dreams of that. So we free up people from doing that type of work to doing real, meaningful work. So we have built this platform, Ripcord, over the past few years. It's very powerful. It is used by the IRS, by major banks, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward, today, we just launched a new tool, a consumer tool that can be used by anyone. It's called Docufy, and it's based on generative AI. We're using what we've built over the past number of years and the power of large language models that I think Mark referred to. There are multiple. There's OpenAI, there's Bard, there's et cetera, that we allow everyone, just like you can create a Gmail account, or anyone can go and create a Slack account. We launched Docufy, so anyone in the world can bring their documents and start asking away and getting automatic summaries. So rather than having to spend hours and hours finding information, or learning, let's say, to go and use a more complex tool, this is something as easy to use as Gmail that anyone can consume, and we're offering it free to the world for people to come in and experiment, and for us to learn from them. What are they using it for? What are the mistakes it makes? What are the accuracies and inaccuracies so we can make it better? So this is something new that we launched called Docufy. It's at docufy.com, and it's free for anyone to use. And look, last but not least, we're based in beautiful California, right across the bay in Hayward. We have one facility in the US that does all the robotic digitization. We have 2 facilities in Japan. The company was founded out of research at NASA. So that's kind of the genesis of the company. And we're backed by some of Silicon Valley's greatest venture capitalists. So with that, thank you, and I'll pass it on to Helen.
Thank you, Sam. If you push the button one more time, and then we're good. Thank you. So we are going to share the world views from a venture capitalist point of view, a founder point of view, a corporate point of view, and a research scientist point of view. So Jay, would you kick us off? Please share your world views of AI.
So thank you again for inviting me to this opportunity. Thank you, Helen. Maybe I could start with a little bit of context. So I've been doing early stage venture capital for 25 years now. A lot of that was associated with my corporate background. So back 20 years ago in 2003, I launched and ran Samsung's venture capital operation, Samsung Ventures. And then subsequent to that, co-founded a firm called Translink Capital, where I worked with multiple Asian corporates. That's when I met Helen and worked for them, even visited Ripcord back in the day. We had Japanese partners as well as Korean and Chinese, Taiwanese partners. But I had the opportunity, because we were effectively the eyes and ears of these massive technology conglomerates, to always look at the forefront of technology. And one of the areas that we looked closely at was naturally artificial intelligence and data science. In fact, my first investment in the category was back in 2008, where I led a Series A round for a company back then, which was focused really on natural language processing and voice recognition technology, which eventually became the leader in conversational AI, a company called SoundHound, which went public a couple of years ago. And that led my journey into the AI domain for the last 15 plus years. GFT Ventures has nothing to do with GPT. Actually, GFT stands for Global Frontier Technology Ventures. This is a brand new firm. It's a COVID baby. We started it during COVID a couple of years ago. And myself and my longtime friend and partner in crime, Jeff Herbst, was in fact with NVIDIA for the last 20 years, leading their biz dev, corp dev, M&A, and investments. So between Jeff and myself, and I would give Jeff far more credit, we've had a lot of exposure into opportunities in AI from a startup perspective. So with that long kind of preface, what are we seeing today as investment opportunities? Well, clearly there's a dichotomy between what we would consider artificial general intelligence large language models. And during the presentation, we referenced OpenAI and their set of competitors, including Anthropic, Hugging Face, and others. And there are everybody else. And quite frankly, in the domain of these large language models, it's really become a big tech game. The amount of resources that go into training these large language models and the cost of operations for inference and whatnot is really beyond the domain of any typical venture startup at this point. I mean, people tend to forget that even though OpenAI launched ChatGPT exactly about a year ago, the reality is that's a 10-year-old startup that was funded primarily initially as almost a nonprofit effort over time. And we've all heard of these massive financing announcements where Microsoft invested $10 billion at a seriously high valuation in OpenAI. More recently, Amazon Web Services, AWS, invested another $4 billion into Anthropic, and so on and so forth. What people tend to forget is the fact that a lot of these investments are led by corporates and strategics. And having been on the corporate side, we actually understand that these investments are actually strategic investments. In fact, every equity dollar that goes into these companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, Microsoft with their Azure cloud service and Amazon Web Services are going to get that back in cloud service revenue. which is far more valuable to them from a market capitalization perspective. So if you're a purely financial investor, quite frankly, it does not make sense to participate in those financing rounds, at least at those valuations. Now, I'm not saying that those companies will not be successful. It's just hard to swallow if you're a purely financial investor like we are and most of the other folks around the table. So what we are focused on are startups that are focused specifically around vertical applications. We call them vertical GPTs, where they have an entrepreneur that has domain expertise, and that could be across any single vertical industry from advertising to agriculture to manufacturing, as well as business function-wise from HR to R&D to sales and marketing. And if you really think about it, the whole category of AI startups, in our view, is probably going to go away in the next couple of years or so, the same way that internet companies as a category or mobile companies as a category went away. Because if you are a B2B focused AI company and you're not using data science and AI on the back end of it, your solution is just not going to be competitive in the market. So those are the opportunities that we're focused on. There is a whole nother category of what we call enablers that include MLOps companies and data prep companies and whatnot. That is also very interesting. But for our investment thesis, we really like entrepreneurs that have deep domain expertise, that are able to understand the technology, build a moat, both on the technology side and the data side, and they will have a head start to a lot of the competition because every single domain is getting very crowded right now, with multiple startups pursuing the same opportunities.
Thank you, Jay. Howie, would you like to share your grand view after many startups you succeeded with and your worldview of AI and what you intend to do as a founder?
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for the invitation. This is after a whole day of listening to AI, hopefully I give you something a little bit new and refreshing. So I've been doing AI machine learning for almost 10 years, starting my own company, doing that in the public company. I ran AI projects in multiple public companies in the last few years. And I also witnessed the starting of the OpenAI, because the OpenAI started about 2015 when Elon Musk and then Reid Hoffman helped to bootstrap this company initially. And I actually saw the beginning of it. So let me give you some perspective on the large language model, because we all heard that ChatGPT is wonderful, all that sort of things. But one question you may have is, how is that different from the AI you have heard for the last, 10, 20 years, right? There are actually a number of things. One is, in the past, as I told you, I started my own AI company. I ran, large AI projects in public companies. Some of the projects, not all of them, but some of the AI projects, right? It's actually, you have to have dedicated people. You have to figure out where's the training data, how to monitor the model performance. You may have lots of smaller AI projects. And then the profound impact of the foundation model is it raised the bar for a pretty large model so that you can achieve some of the things you wanted to do 5 years ago, 3 years ago, just by interacting with this large foundation model via prompt engineering. So you save a lot of the smaller model work, smaller AI projects work. For instance, you wanted to just figure out the sentiment of some website, right? In the past, you have to train the data, you have to do all those things. Now you actually can throw that data into the foundation model and then get a pretty good result out of it without having sophisticated data science work behind that. Now, not all of the AI project will be automated away because of that, but a good percentage of that. So that's what I see that's a very interesting part as a practitioner of the AI person in the last decade or so. So that's just one thing. The other thing is, we all know ChatGPT is a very powerful. Mark showed you, a number of different Anthropic, Bard, all those models. It's more than ChatGPT, right? And guess what? It's only going to get much better in the next 3-5 years. If we are kind of excited or concerned about how great or how potential dangerous, depending on the use case you are looking at, it's only going to get, at least order of magnitude more, potentially 2, right? Of course, if you look at a foundation model, it's always like the computation, the algorithm, and the data. And then all these 3 angles, there's a lot of potential to improve them. NVIDIA just released a new GPU this week. It's easily 4-6x of the performance of the previous generation. That would push out the performance. That would push the performance up by a good margin already. So what I'm trying to say is, when we are kind of thinking about generative AI, when we think about a foundation model, don't just look at what we have today. Think ahead, right? I think there will be more excitement or more things, when it comes to regulation, when it comes to, use cases. The potential is there. And then the last thing I want to share in my world's view, this is something I shared with Helen right before this one, is what I'm personally excited or personally passionate about, right? There are 2 things I'm passionate about. One is, what is the impact of the generative AI to the society, not just jobs or whatnot everyone's talking about it, but also our next generation, our kids' generation. Because I can tell you, I have kids at a grade school, right? And I can assure you that when they get into the workplace, it's a totally different world. And are we preparing them for that, right? Are we preparing for them for the new workplace, totally different workplace? And I think we have a lot of work to do on that. The other thing is the boundary of this technology. We are both underestimating and overestimating the technology, in my opinion. Overestimating, I don't think it's going to replace jobs left and right, at least in the foreseeable future, right? Sure, it can do a lot of programming, but guess what? Silicon Valley only hired more programmers since ChatGPT was released in November last year. After all the layoff, and then they actually started hiring again, right? Google and Facebook had more engineers after ChatGPT, so that gives you a sense, right? However, in the long run, right, what's the implication, right? Well, what's the boundary? Both, this technology can be used by the bad guys and the good guys, right? I'm a cybersecurity person in my professional job. I think about how I'm going to leverage this technology to protect the world better, but at the same time also thinking about how the bad guys are going to potentially leverage the technology so that, it make my life a little bit more difficult. So what's the boundary of this technology? So these 2 things, right? What is the impact to the society, to our, next generation, to the workplace, is something I'm very passionate about. And then the other thing is, what's the boundary? I think we are kind of still trying to figure out this technology. We are potentially underestimating and overestimating the boundary. And then that's something that I'm going to spend a lot of my time figuring that out. And I hope that all of us are learning this together.
So I'm going to circle back to you. I would ask you to tell us, if you would start one company today, what would you do? But you can sit on that for now. Sam, so Ripcord, great company with robotics, AI, machine learning, and you had a background, and we are in California. This is APAC. So what's your grand view of your business and your technologies to impact enterprises? And now you are entering the consumer market. So what's your worldview as a CEO and the president of this enterprise?
Sure. Thanks for that. Before I get to that, by the way, I'll give you a great deal in our valuation. So we're much better than OpenAI. It's great. Look, we obviously we're a business, so we're very practically minded, right? We have a little bit of a different view in terms of AI, and we view it from the perspective of usability. we sincerely believe that the most successful technologies are the easiest to use. If you look at Google, I know it's worth maybe $1.5 trillion today. It really, when Google started, if you think back, I don't know when did it start, 15, 20 years ago, and you went to google.com, and there were many search engines back then. You went to google.com, it just had one search bar. Super simple. And the key thing about it, not just simplicity, it was very fast. I don't know if you remember. It was very unique about Google. Super fast response, which goes to usability. If you look at the iPhone, the first iPhone really did not have any groundbreaking technology, but it was all about usability. It's putting pieces together of technology to make it usable. So we are fairly passionate about bringing products that are highly usable. We're not as passionate about building the best damn technology. To us, there are other much smarter people in research labs and other companies that can do that. What we believe our place is in society, in this ecosystem, is to make these technologies, and specifically document intelligence, usable by the masses. Because we believe the ultimate value is if more people use it. You go now around the world, it's unbelievable. Everyone, you go to countries where 15 years ago people did not have a phone, now everyone has a mobile phone. Why? It's so easy to use. Anyone can use an iPhone or an Android phone, right? Anyone can create a Facebook account or a TikTok account. So usability, in our mind, is really the critical factor in making a technology like generative AI not only widely usable, but used for the better of humanity, if you make it super easy to use. So that's kind of one. Related to it also is, again, we're a startup company in the Valley, is practicality, is bringing practical use. We're trying, part of the reason we launched this tool today called Docufy, it's really more than anything an experiment. We want to learn what type of documents are people going to upload? What type of questions are they going to ask? Who are the most frequent users? Because we want to understand the practical use of generative AI. And then from there, experiment and bring more practical applications to the world. So really for us, these are two main things, is usability and speed, which goes to many more people can use it, and then finding those practical uses, what you can call killer apps that people in a certain function, let's say financial analysts or insurance adjusters, or maybe it's nurses, or maybe we don't know. We're not going in with an assumption, knowing that who will be the power users of this technology, but we're experimenting and exploring what that may be. And we're hoping that through that experimentation, very rapid experimentation, we will land on a few killer use cases that could bring tremendous value to the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. So inevitably, I have to ask this question about the regulations. And Mark, I would start with you. What's your view on regulations with artificial intelligence for the state, for the country, for the world? You just went to the World Economy Forum. So give us your take on that. And Jay, would you please follow with that? Thank you.
Have you got all day? I will just say that we were at the World Economic Forum AI Governance Summit yesterday and today, and the discussion is quite rich. There is the general purpose technology aspect of generative AI gives rise to a question: should we regulate the models, or should we simply regulate by sector, by application area? And I'd like to give you just a taste of the promise and the peril with an example. It's not the language model itself, the ability for this model to talk to you about various things. It's what happens when you connect it using an API to a system. So an example that that came up just in a discussion with Tom Khalil before this panel was that if you connect it to something like CRISPR, and you can cook up a superbug that would be a terrifically horrible disease, right? You could also cook up a cure to some horrible disease, right? And it's just making it really easy. So what's happening is you're making the possibilities with this amplified intelligence of something that used to take a lab full of people specially trained, making it possible for an ordinary person in their living room to do something, very cheaply and quickly. And that in itself makes the advent of these foundation models something that really needs regulation. And so that's a sort of short version of it.
Okay, Jay. What's your verdict?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad Mark went before me because, quite frankly, I'm not as familiar with the entire regulatory aspect of this, other than the fact that there are certain elements that are directly impactful to startups that are in the AI domain today. And if you think about AI in general, AI doesn't come from scratch. It is actually trained. And if you think about where the training data comes from, the reality is a lot of these foundational models and a lot of the AI companies, the training data source, a lot of it still is coming from the internet, right? OpenAI and all the other competitors. And as we all know, there's a lot of data on the internet that is considered unclean data. And this is copyright infringing, privacy infringing, brand inappropriate, discriminatory. There's a lot of issues with that data. And it's almost like you're training your genius child and you're feeding them with the information that's on the internet that, as any parent would be really scared about because there's so much garbage on the internet. And so if you think about it from an enterprise customer perspective, while it's a lot of fun to play around with these models and it's fascinating and whatnot, if you actually think about using them as part of your business process, there's actually multiple red flags that go up because of a lot of these training data sources are questionable. And so from that perspective, and yes, OpenAI did announce a blanket indemnification. Now, we all know that you need to read the fine print to really understand what that means. And those kind of indemnifications will actually be challenged in court. There's no question about it. And there are several other models like Stability AI that have been actually sued by image bank copyright holders that are going to see their day in court. So there is a lot of activities in these domains. And if you're a startup, it's very challenging if you are building your business on the premise that is fundamentally could be shaken by regulatory or legal action. And while the regulatory frameworks are still early and developing, the legal frameworks are still early and developing, I think all of us in this room can know from a common sense perspective what could be risky behavior. And so from a startup perspective, as we evaluate a lot of these opportunities, we tend to veer away from startups that have not really thought through that framework and those potential risks. And we focus on companies that have actually thought through that and how have they made their AI technology enterprise-proof and enterprise usable because they've actually thought through the data issues ahead of time. So for us, that is actually a very, very important evaluation criteria.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, Howie, we're waiting for your 1-minute pitch of your next AI startup.
Well, so there are really two things I want to say. One is actually related to your previous sort of the question, right? The regulation. And the regulation, just like technology, is a double-edged sword. It can do good and to do bad things. And sometimes you want the regulation, sometimes you don't. But no matter what, why do we even want the regulation? That's because the technology can potentially be used better bad guys, as I alluded earlier, right? So in May this year, there was a, image on the internet, like there was an explosion next to Pentagon, and guess what, right? That's faked, and then it did a damage to the stock market for a very brief of time, and that's kind of a thing. So to me, for startup or the next journey, a lot of that is actually contained the badness the generative AI can potentially do for you, right? So that's kind of the one. But the other thing I would really love to do, I'm not sure next startup or not yet, but if I were to do one, one thing I'm passionate, as I mentioned, is about for education, for those things, for career coaching, for the education, right? How do we leverage this technology? Think about it. Education is not a scalable sort of the practice, right? You need lots of armies of people, teachers or whatnot. Can you leverage the generative AI to make that a otherwise unscalable process or the practice way more scalable? That's something I'm passionate about. And then if I were to do it, startup, certainly it is a candidate.
I'm getting signals. I have 2 minutes. So we are at the APEC event in San Francisco. And it is a historic event for all of us to be here. So I would like everyone on this panel to give their final words about AI, about the world at this event, and then we'll close this out and turn back to Darlene. So Sam, we'll start with you and come all the way back.
Thanks. I would say, very simply, we should all embrace AI fully, completely. Whether it's companies, individuals. I think our education system is so outdated. I don't know why kids are being taught the way they're being taught today when the world is a different world. So I think full embracing of technology. And I'll just give a quick anecdote. If you look about 15 years ago, some of us may remember, there were retail stores called Sears or Kmart. Does anyone remember Sears or Kmart? Yeah? Yeah, any favorites here? Sears or Kmart? Upline, right. So, and there was also a company called Walmart. Walmart still stands today and doing very well, actually. If you're an investor, I prefer Target, but Walmart just as a business, unbelievable, right? Okay, so part of Walmart's success is about 10 years ago, when Amazon became kind of a thing, Walmart decided, rather than fight it, to fully embrace e-commerce. And they went out and bought a company, I think, called Jet, right? Was it Jet.com? It was some like startup, e-commerce startup that was trying to compete with Amazon, not doing quite well. But the bottom line is they decided we're going to embrace this. We're going to go all in on e-commerce. And guess what? Sears and Kmart, they hired some people. It's not like they did not embrace it. They had a website, but they did not fully embrace it. Guess where they are today, right? So, and you can apply that. There's so many anecdotes. Nokia, on and on and on. Anyone ever use a BlackBerry?
Yeah.
Remember BlackBerries? Yeah. Now, BlackBerry, they thought, oh, this touchscreen thing, people are not going to like it, and they resisted it. And they resisted the whole app store, and they resisted progress. And companies that resist progress, people that resist progress, countries that resist progress are the ones that fall behind. The reason California is California, and we have, what, $4 trillion companies within 20 miles radius, Meta, Facebook, you got Apple, Tesla, and Google. Why? Because we embrace progress. So I think the world, all of us, whether at an individual level, companies, or countries, embrace this, and good will come out of it. Because humans have an amazing way of self-regulating and having the right balance of regulation. It will happen. Let's not sweat it. There's not some major danger. There's not like AI is going to take over nuclear missiles and start. It ain't going to happen. Because over time, when more people embrace the technology, naturally, the right level of regulation will happen. So let's not do prohibition. Let's do, what was it called, M-protein in the prior. Let's have a good drug for hangovers. So
Thank you,
that's kind of my view
Sam.
on AI.
Very encouraging. Okay. Howie?
So actually, there's some study before coming over, right? This is APEC. Lots of the world leaders, political leaders, economic, technology leaders in the same city. The last time there were so many world leaders in this city was, take a guess, how many years ago? Actually, 1952, believe it or not, to close out World War II. That's a juncture of the human history, believe it or not. I do believe, we are at a juncture of the human history, right? The digital journey from, just the past technology to the AI era. So it's actually great that, at APEC, we actually have a chance to have so many leaders, so many people from, different countries to discuss not just, a lot of other important topics, but also technology topics. So I'm so glad that this is a place, and this is Silicon Valley, the place that, invented so many technologies, including, OpenAI, the generative AI. So I think this is the right place, right time, and I'm very much looking forward to engage with more people.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, I'm going to take the other side of Sam's thought, and I'm at the university, and we are looking at what's possible, and because we have a new technology that plugs into so many things, it needs to be viewed differently from the breakthrough, the prior breakthroughs. It really is part of our everyday lives, right? Every human activity is changed. The possibility of distributing ChatGPT to billions of people in a matter of seconds is only possible, right, because of this infrastructure that we have. And now it's plugged in, right? And so things change overnight. And for that reason, I think it's a period of experimentation, and we really should be thinking carefully about how we want to deploy it. And the period of experimentation it's like a Cambrian explosion, and there will be a lot of experiments, a lot of companies that don't make it. But I really would like the fact that we are together at APEC to be an opportunity to coordinate among countries to be sure that we're fastening our seatbelts appropriately.
Okay, Jay.
Yeah, so I don't think it's any secret that we are increasingly living in a fractured world. And during my recent trips to Asia, I've had a chance to meet with government officials in Singapore, in Japan, and in Korea that see AI as a national security project. And every single country, I'm sure, including the US, is thinking about this as well. And they're talking about building national-level foundation models and consolidating some of the efforts for some of the largest technology companies in each country and region. And as we think about why APEC was first formed, and the fact that global leaders from all over are now here together, wouldn't it be great if we could create a global foundation model for cooperation, eliminate a lot of the redundancy and the waste, the resources that would require all of these different disparate efforts to happen across different countries? That would be great. So, I know it's a pipe dream, but the more people that I think share this thought and vision, I think the chances could be higher. And I hope the leaders can get together and really think about how can we create this global foundation model for the betterment of everybody.
Well, thank you, Jay. Congratulations for raising $140 million. And it sounds like you're on to raising a lot more to make it happen, what you just said.
He's supporting the global foundation model.
Well, thank you so much for having us today, and thank you everyone on my panel. This is amazing, and I wish we had more time. So maybe we should have more podcasts or more content from Darlene's organization. Okay, back to you, Darlene.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
thank you.